there's no reason to jump in and buy
Yeah.
anything that doesn't cash flow in my book. Because now that I've accumulated a pretty sizable portfolio, I can be patient and wait for things.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, excited to have David Vernich. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Todd. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So David is a commercial lender with more than 3 decades of experience in the banking industry. In 2007, he partnered with other investors to purchase real estate and began his journey to generate passive income. David now owns more than 100 homes in Tennessee. Do you still own over 100 homes in Tennessee?
I do.
Man, that's a lot of homes. And you're passionate about and just helping others reap those benefits, reap the benefits of passive income in their lives. You're an author who wrote a book called Middle Class to Millionaire, Making the Leap to the Next Level. We'll definitely dive into kind of that book. And I really kind of want to understand, kind of your thoughts behind that as well. So with that said, Dave, why don't you just give our listeners a bit more about your background and what you're doing today?
Okay, great. Yes, Todd. Thanks for having me again. And essentially, when everybody asked me about my origin story, so to speak, it really came at my midlife crisis at age 45. So I'm 60 years old this year. And at 45, I was still a banker, still am today. And I had 4 sons, young sons at home. My wife did not work. I was making about $80,000 a year. And I thought I was doing okay, not great, but I didn't think I was doing poorly. We never worried about where our next meal was coming from. But using the metaphor of we were talked earlier about football, using the metaphor of football, essentially from age 25 to 65 is 40 years. So your career. And so you got 40 years. Each quarter would be made up of 10 years each. So at 45, you're at their halftime. So it's time to go in the locker room, make your halftime adjustments, look at your stats and see how you did. And when I got to the locker room and looked at my stats, I wanted to vomit because at the end of the day, I was not going to be able to sustain the standard of living that I had. It was an okay standard of living, but I was hoping it'd be better than that. But just looking at the numbers did not pencil out. I was not going to be able to sustain my standard of living in retirement.
And you're just looking at kind of your 401k at the time. What did you have at the time?
That's one thing I need to go back and check, but I probably had.
Well, maybe not financially how much, but
Yeah.
what type of investments did you?
Yeah, it was strictly doing what the financial planners tell you to do, which is, cut expenses to the bone as much as you can stand and sock everything into a 401k. So that's what I was doing.
So the 401k. So you looked at that 401k, looked at your savings and went, wow, I got to work until I'm 90 to live till I'm 95.
Yeah. If I wanted to live the lifestyle I wanted, that's what I have to do. Yeah. And so I thought I was doing everything like I was told to do, and the numbers didn't work. And really what it came down to applying a withdrawal rate of about 4%, which is what most financial planners say. If you want your money to last all the way through 30 years of retirement, you can only draw about 4% a year at. So $1 million in retirement, you can only pull $40,000 at that calculation. And I was making 80. So basically it's like, that gets me halfway there.
Wow.
And then Social Security was only going to pay maybe 30, back then. Yeah. So I was short, and I didn't want to be short on my income. I wanted to maintain or increase my lifestyle.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, that to me is the sad part about where a lot of people kind of feel like they want to be at retirement is they go, well, I can downsize. We'll live a little bit more frugally and all this. And I'm going, why? Why would you want to do that? Isn't retirement meant to be like these kind of golden years? Like you're retiring because you worked hard your whole life. And now you're saying, hey, I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. So why would you think that it would be a good idea to cut your expenses? Don't you want to say, hey, I'm making 80 now. I want to make sure when I retire, we're able to spend 100 now. right? So I want to be able to do more things, not less things. If I ever retire, that's what I want to do.
And that's what I wanted to do too. And the path I was on was not going to get me there.
Yeah.
So basically, as a banker and a loan officer, I had to kind of do a little cheat code and look at my loan portfolio and said, now who's actually doing what I need to do? And by and large, the answer came to be small business owners.
Yeah.
But most small business owners that I knew basically were in the same boat, in the sense that they weren't saving enough for retirement either. And they were working as hard or harder than me as a banker. So when I really dug even deeper, I came to the conclusion only one group of people in my entire loan portfolio had it figured out. And these were the real estate investors.
And so you said, okay, these guys got to figure it out. I'm gonna join them. So when when I introduced you, talked about you partnered with other investors. How did you partner with these other investors?
So basically, what I did was I contacted some folks that I had helped get into the real estate business years ago. I had been at this point in my career through probably 5 bank mergers from different banks in my entire career in banking. So I would I would move to another bank when a bigger bank bought us, because working for a big bank is like working for the federal government, very bureaucratic, not very
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably
And
can't use much of your, personality or personal skills to build those relationships. I know as somebody who lends from banks, definitely don't love the big banks. So
no,
small banks are so much more fun to actually do business with.
exactly. So that's what I would continue to move to smaller and smaller banks to make sure I could go get things done for my clients. And in instances, I would also have old clients that were still at the old banks that I had banked with. Well, in this case, when I came to that revelation that, hey, I need to do real estate investing, this is not something new that I never thought of before. Actually, the reality of the situation was I had thought about doing real estate investing about 10 years before that. The problem is I had, as I said, 4 young sons at home. My wife didn't work, and I didn't have a lot of extra time. I wanted to be with my kids, and I wanted them to have a dad that went to sporting events. So I had no weekends free to go, find houses and fix them up. And I also, frankly, was very bad at anything having to do with home improvement or renovations, to the point where I didn't even like doing anything in my own house. My wife would ask me to fix something, and I would say, hey, honey, my favorite tool in the tool belt is the checkbook. Let's find somebody to do this and save me the time from doing it. So I would never do things even in my own house. So I couldn't imagine on these people that are doing this on the side, going in there and tearing walls out and redoing a house. It just wasn't my skill set whatsoever. Yeah. And I had no desire to even learn. I mean, if you said, okay, let's say you're fired from your job, do you want to go learn how to do this? And the answer would be, hell no. Still don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I knew I had a big weakness, and that weakness was that I couldn't do most, if not all, the components that you needed to be a successful real estate investor. So I broke it down into 4 steps. Essentially, you had to be able to find properties that would work. The numbers would work. Yep. You'd have to fix the property up if it needed repairs, which I've already explained. I knew I wasn't going to enjoy doing that.
Right.
Then you had to work with property management to get somebody in that house, and then you had to finance it, at the end. And I basically said, you know what? Out of all those things, I think I can find houses, because when I started, it was 2007. So right at the financial crisis. And that was another factor that motivated me to jump into the real estate pool.
We're at 2007, and you're in the market you were in, where the prices already had they already declined quite a bit, or were they still pretty peaked?
No, they were tanking.
They were dropping quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, I said, this is a once in a lifetime fire sale in real estate. It's now or never. So I had all these forces coming together at the same time that basically said, this is the time to do it. You're 45, you're not getting any younger. The real estate market's crashing. You've tried multiple other side gigs that didn't work. I tried buying a business, starting a business, doing an Amazon business. I also tried multi-level marketing even one time. None of them worked. If they had worked, I would have kept on doing them. So I'm like, okay, real estate, you're next up on the agenda.
What do you think? Why didn't they work? Is it do you have you kind of looked back and reflected on why those other business opportunities didn't work? Was it passion of yours? Was it what was it?
Well, one of the first ones I did, actually, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was the high school and college cartoonist for my newspaper. So the first
Interesting.
business I wanted to do was basically do these postcards for the tourists in Nashville and have country music songs on them with,
Hmm.
these singing characters and whatever. And actually it was okay, but it's just like if you sat there and did the math at the end of the day
Yeah.
and everything you put into it, even though that was a passion of mine to do cartooning, at the end of the day, it just wasn't paying the
the
bills. It
the
wasn't
amount
worth
of
it.
work you put into it, you're making, $10 an hour type of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Chump
Yeah.
change. So it
Yeah.
just,
My wife had a passion like that too. And she, she loved it. And
yeah.
certainly she made some money doing it. But after she really looked at it and went, okay, I'm like making $10 an hour. There's no way I can make, maybe I can make 15 or 20 if I get really fast, but I can't do well.
Basically you're getting paid to do a hobby,
Yeah, yeah,
but
that's
not paid
exactly that.
well.
That was exactly her
Yeah.
conclusion too. So yeah, that definitely is not a sustainable business for sure.
Right. So yeah, I tried other things that I was more passionate about than real estate, obviously. In fact, real estate is basically a means to an end. And
Yeah.
as a banker, banks, that's their favorite form of collateral, real estate by far. So any business out there that comes to them, if they don't have real estate, they're going to take a look at those things, but it's a whole lot smoother process if there's collateral with real estate backing up the
Mm,
loan.
yeah, yeah. It's always worth something, right?
Right.
Even if the business fails, at least we have the real estate to fall back on. And not that we want it, but at least we have it and we have something there. That
So
makes sense.
basically, with all that, I went and found one of my old customers, and I said, "Hey, would you teach me how to flip a house?" Knowing that I
Mm,
wouldn't like 99.9% of what they taught me, I was just going to shut up, bite my tongue,
yeah.
do exactly what they said, and then at the end, we were going to do one house together and split the proceeds 50-50. I did the house, and I was shocked at the time that in 2007, with foreclosures everywhere, one of the hardest parts of me getting into real estate was getting a house when there were foreclosures everywhere.
Mm,
It was such a bizarre time when people were like, real estate agents were dropping like flies. So,
yep.
the people you would call or wouldn't return your calls, then
Yep.
you got one that did return your call, and they would say, "Hey, I already sold that to my buddy." And I'm like, "Well, why did you put your sign in the yard?" And it's
Because I had
basically to get,
to.
yeah, had to, and to get leads for
Yeah.
future deals. And I had some agents say, "You can't do what you're doing," because I
Yeah.
wasn't the
Yeah.
end buyer, all this stuff.
Yep.
Finally, I had to call my mentor and basically say, "Look, winter's coming. I need to get a house. Can you, and you're getting calls every day from these. So can you just kind of throw me a bone here and give me a house?" And the next day they got a house, my first house.
Nice.
So kind of a light bulb kind of came in my head when I saw that. And then the next step was we got to fix up the house. So they gave me the paint by numbers. Here's what this house needs to be done. Here's the people that we use to do it. Here's what it should cost you. So it was really easy from that perspective, since they kind of did all the work for me, and I just had to oversee it, meet with the builders, the contractors, and
Yep.
make sure the work got done before they got paid, so we didn't get ripped off. And then before we even finished the house, we had somebody knocking on the door and said, "Is this house for sale or rent?" Well, back in 2007, nobody wanted to buy houses, but there were a lot of people looking for rentals.
Mhm.
And so they basically moved in the house, and were in that house until this past year,
Oh
14
wow.
and a half years solid, before we basically said, "Hey, we need to redo this house. You need to move on to the next one."
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story. So after I finished the house, I went back to my mentor and I said, "Look, you were teaching me how to do this. The only thing I was trying to figure out was one thing: where do I add value in the process?" Because I knew I stunk at so many things. I didn't know where I fit in. And the only thing that I was able to do that I enjoy doing was what I did for a living. And that is getting the money, whether that be a loan or getting an investor to partner with us to put the money in. So I
Yep.
basically became their money guy to raise money to do houses. So they didn't have to put a dime of their own money in the property. And we would all share on the equity side, the good and the bad. And
Yeah.
thankfully, for the last 15 years, it's pretty much been all good.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a bonus. You got in at a great time. Although at that time it didn't seem so great, did it?
Yeah, basically, I was running in the building where everybody was running out the
Yeah,
exits, and it
yeah.
does make you stop and think when you're like, "Am I crazy?" Or when you go against the grain like that, sometimes it's human nature. It's like I know, and I know that this is the best time I'm going to have in decades to buy something, but it's still you can't help but feel, "Am I missing something?"
Well, you can't not hear people, right?
Right.
And so you're hearing the negatives, you're seeing the negatives on the news. I got in at 2008, very similar time. Prices have probably dropped even longer, but farther, but they were still dropping in 2008. The stuff
Right.
you're buying for, 100,000 by 2013 was that same house could have sold for probably 70,000. So, you have to somehow look beyond the noise. And I think that's the most challenging part, especially. And I don't know where we're at right now in this market. We might see it again. I don't feel like it's going to be a 2007, 8 again, but where are you with that? Are you guys buying still right now today? Or, kind of what's your thought in the market? If you're giving some advice to somebody, what's your advice? What's your thought?
So yes, we bought something actually December 15th, and we got one closing January 19th. So
So
we're
you're
still
still
buying.
active.
And that's because the numbers still work and the
Yeah.
prices are starting to come down. It is starting to become much more of a buyer's market than a seller's market. So as long as the numbers work, I'll always be in the market. But if they don't work, I'll sit on the sidelines. There's no reason to jump in and buy
Yeah.
anything that doesn't cash flow in my book. Because now that I've accumulated a pretty sizable portfolio, I can be patient and wait for things to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so valuable. As long as the cash flows, right? The numbers work. It really doesn't, I mean, a little bit, but it doesn't really matter that much of what's going on around you, right? The numbers have to work.
The numbers have to work. And then, when everybody's jumping in and paying too much money, that's when I decide to sit on the sidelines because I don't bet 100% just on appreciation. I
Yeah.
have
You
to,
can't.
I have to be able to sit there and say, if this doesn't work out, it cash flows and whether it appreciates or not. Appreciation to me is really the icing on the cake
Yeah.
because what I'm trying to do is, my original goal when I did this before I went through my first mentorship was to buy one house a year for 10 years at age 45,
Yeah.
put a 20-year amortizing loan on the first house at 45 that would be paid off when I was 65. And
Mm,
then every year after that, a house would be paid off. And
mm,
then I would be generating about $1,000 a month in cash flow per house when they're paid off. That was my rough calculations, which was $120,000 plus Social
mm.
Security plus my 401k. So based on that, I thought, okay, now that's a plan that will actually pencil out.
And it would. Obviously, you've accelerated that plan. You haven't followed that. You've done. I think that happens. Most people do that. They say, "Hey, well, I'm going to buy a house a year," and so then all of a sudden they're buying 10 a year. But, but that's a smart plan. And anybody who heard that, I mean, that's a very sound plan that anybody could implement. Is buying a house a year, putting a 20-year on it, and then when you're 65, boom, you've got one house that's paid off every single year I mean, that's an awesome plan, right? And you can sell those houses if you need the big cash injection, or you can just keep on cash flowing, which is the best way, right? Just keep on cash flowing them.
Well, that was my original plan until I did the first one. And then I realized real quick, well, this is hard. I mean, it is
Yeah.
really hard to find them and fix them up and all that. And I had limited capacity, financial capacity back then. So
Mm.
I actually did my first house with a $100,000 unsecured line of credit from another banker friend who had lending authority of $100,000. So it didn't have to go to loan committee.
Wow.
Now, I was fine as far as on paper. I had a W-2 job. I had clean credit. I didn't have excessive personal debt,
Yeah.
but I probably shouldn't have been able to get over my annual salary at unsecured debt.
Especially in 2007 as the market's
Exactly.
imploding, right?
Exactly. But I knew where to go, to get it. And so that was the easiest part. Then I thought to myself, that's not going to be sustainable to
Yeah.
scale this thing. So what I thought was, I'm going to talk to my mentors and say, look, you do all the work, you find the houses. I will come with a short-term equity partner who will be able to have the cash or the credit or a combination of the two to buy the house and to fix up the house. And the first person that I pitched this idea to was my next door neighbor, who was a doctor. And I told him, I'm like, look, I'm going to go and learn how to flip a house. And he basically fell on the ground and was laughing at me. And the reason he was is because he knew how bad it was. He said, Dave, you send your kids over to me to fix the bikes when their bikes are broken, and you're going to flip a house. And I'm like, no. It's not me flipping it. It's my 14 years experience partners that do this full time for a living.
Yeah.
He said, okay, well, let me know how that works out for you. And said, okay. And I came back and said, hey, it worked perfectly. Here's the numbers. So we bought that house for $70,000. We put 15 into it for 85.
Yeah.
It appraised for 115. I got a loan for 80% of that, paid off the credit line, and it cash flowed.
Yeah.
And I said, you can do the same thing. Now you go to your bank and get $100,000. You're a doctor. They'll throw the money at you. And that's what he did. He borrowed 100,000, put it in. We paid the interest on it. So he literally never had to put a dime of his own money in there. And now he's got about 18 to 20 houses with us. So
that's
to
awesome.
me, it's just like, okay, this thing works. So I just got to find more guys like that. And I've got the people to do all the work, because I think there's a whole lot more people in the world like me that don't want to do the work, that don't want to go out there and get their hands dirty, that don't want to have to figure this out from A to Z. They just want to plug into a system and say, I don't have to have 100% of a house with 100% of the headaches, because I can't do 100% of the work, but I'd be happy to take a percentage of it to be able to get in and get out. So that's how I've scaled it.
Yeah, I think there's so many people that just are held back because of those kind of limiting beliefs or those fears, right? I don't have the skills to fix the house. I don't want to be called at 3 a.m. to go, fix a toilet, or, I don't want to have to evict the tenant. That's just something I couldn't do. Oh, whatever that is. I can't find these properties. I don't have time. Whatever. They've got other resources, and a lot of times it's the money, but they got other resources to be able to get into these properties and to truly create something powerful, right? I mean, you've created now a retirement plan that most people would be very envious of, and you no longer have to decrease your expenses if you so choose. When you decide to retire, you'll be able to spend a lot more if you would like, and which is, in my opinion, the dream of retirement.
Well, and you look at the current retirement plan people have. I mean, they're not even supposed to touch that money until 59 and a half without getting a penalty.
Yep.
And I don't want to wait. The older you get, the less likely you're going to have the best of health or the energy to do all the traveling you want to do. So my wife and I, this past September, when we both turned 60, I took the entire month off, first time ever. I took 6 days without pay to get the entire month off, which is no big deal. I had sold a house that I had bought years ago. I had given me about $60,000 in gains from that house. And I used all that money, and we went to Greece traveling first class for the entire month. And I said, I want to do this like every time I can do it before I turn 65, not wait till I'm 65.
Yeah.
And even then, you don't know if you can do it, because not many people are going to drop that kind of money when they first go into retirement.
Yeah. I love that. Let's talk about this book a little bit. There's a lot of, I'm sure we're all in the same boat. We got a lot of friends, we got a lot of family that you just look and you go, man, they're just not going to be set up well for retirement. I'm thinking about a lot of people in my head right now. And it's just like, man, you're setting yourself up for failure. Are you ever going to be able to retire, first of all? So how do we talk to them about and motivate them to be able to do something a little bit different to actually have a true retirement?
Well, I guess that was my big epiphany, that a lot of people don't really spend any thought process in that since it's so far in the future. They kind of feel like I'll deal with that later. I've got too many things burning,
Yeah.
burning up my time now.
Right. 25 to 65, 35 to 65, 45 to 65, whatever it might be. It feels like a long ways away. I mean, I'm 40, almost 41 right now. It feels like 60 is like eons away, but it's only 20 years, right?
But yeah, and if you look back, I mean, hasn't virtually every year gone faster than the one before?
All the
Yeah.
time. And you look back and you go, wow, just like I I I look at these, kids that are, and I call them kids. I mean, these people that are like in their 20s. I don't feel like I'm that much older than them. Well, yeah, they feel like I'm that much older than them. But for me, it went so fast that it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that long ago.
Well, now my oldest is 35 years old, and of course, just turning 60 is a little milestone anyway. But the bottom line is, I still feel like I'm in my 20s even
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But when I look in the mirror, obviously, I don't believe that for a minute. But to answer your original question, some people you can't make a dent in their psyche because they either want to be the ostrich, put the ostrich in the sand
Yeah.
mentality where
Yeah.
I'll deal with it later. There's too much stuff on my plate now to deal with this. But the reality is, if they don't, the sooner they deal with it, it's kind of like course correction when you're a sailboat. If you just have a little bit of a course correction now, you don't have to do the hard work at the end and try to catch up, or in our metaphor with the football game, you don't have to throw the Hail Mary in the fourth quarter. But sadly, for most Americans, when they go into retirement and they use that time that they have to actually look at their situation, it's too late to really do anything about it because you've cut off your main source of income by retiring.
Yep.
And then you're only going to be able to do one thing, and that is cut expenses until you die and hope you die before your money runs out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a sad future, right? Hope you die before your money runs out, right?
Great plan, right? I'm
Yeah,
excited. I'm excited about that retirement plan.
yeah, that sounds like a horrible retirement plan. I hope I die quick because man, my money is going to be gone soon. And by the way, I don't have enough money to do anything. That's like the only thing I can do is sit at home and watch TV, and that's it. Like that doesn't sound fun at all. I want to be out sailing at the ocean and climbing mountains and whatever else that going to Greece, like you, like you did. That sounds a lot more fun. So what Millie, your book, Middle Class to Millionaire, maybe a couple of like key takeaways that a reader would get out of that book. Why should somebody read that book?
Well, the reason I wrote it is because looking back, when you get to 60, you kind of look back on your life a little bit and say, well, what lessons do I know now that I wish somebody had shown me? And that's why I wrote the book. Essentially, I wish somebody had written this book that opened my eyes. And in one way, there's a lot of books out there that I've read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad being one that people hear a lot.
Yeah.
Cash Flow Quadrant, just opening up your mind. But I just didn't understand how important it was to do something as early as possible. Like you're in your early 40s. I didn't have this stuff even on my radar. I was trying things, different things, but essentially I believed in that myth of the 40-year retirement plan that in the end, the pot of gold is half a pot, and you have to keep surviving until the gold runs out. This plan here is so much better because I've been able to accomplish, I still contribute to my 401k. I still work a full-time job. But when I did a comparison between my real estate and my 401k, my real estate equity is 4.5 times more
Wow.
than my equity, the account balance in my 401k. My 401k, I've been putting money in since I was 22 years old. So, that's a long time, 22 to 60. But I've already surpassed that 4 times in 15 years. And so
Wow.
I'm able to do things now. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not telling people don't do your 401k. I'm saying you're missing the boat if that's all you're doing. And you probably, unless you are a highly paid and highly disciplined person on expenses, if you're in that boat, you could probably sock enough money away there to retire comfortably. But that's such a small percentage. I think Fidelity and Vanguard said only about 10% of the of American households will have $1 million in the 401k to live off in retirement, and $1 million is not what it used to be.
10% will only have $1 million.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that is very low. You know,
And so the average person in their 60s right now, because I see these studies coming across all the time, the average person has less than 250,000
wow.
in the retirement account. And as a banker, when I get personal financial statements for people that apply for loans, it is very rare to see anybody has over $1 million.
Wow.
There's a lot of people that have zero, absolutely nothing. And I'm talking about people in their 50s. They haven't even started yet.
Wow. Yeah, it's I mean, it just shows you the power of taking action, right? You're putting stuff in your 401k and that's fine, but in 15 years, you 4x'd what you did in 38 years. I mean, that's just the power of taking action, the power of real estate, the power of, you know, just really non-traditional forms of investing. That, you know, if you're just going to go the 401k route, that you're going to get what you're going to get. You're going to get what everybody else is, which is, you know, like you said, less than 10% have $1 million to retire on. And that's just such a small number. Are you still putting in your 401k, or did you stop doing that in order to focus on real estate?
No, I'm still doing it. In fact, I get a match to do it. So there's free money on the table.
Yeah.
And, you know, essentially one of the big secrets to me that people don't understand is their capacity to borrow money. So many people think debt is evil. And that's one of the big lessons I learned when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Being a banker, I mean, that was my job, is to get people to borrow money for assets.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's like there's good debt and bad debt. Consumer debt for cars and your own property that you live in is bad debt. But good debt is what we do as real estate investors. We're buying a house that we don't live in. Somebody else lives in it, pays you a rent that pays that mortgage for you. So that's how you really accumulate wealth, is by providing something of value for somebody to live in, enough for them to go to work and pay you rent and build your equity that way.
David, as a banker and a real estate investor, what's your opinion on what's the right amount of debt to have? You know, some people want to max leverage at 80, 85%. Other people are like, hey, no, you got to be at, 50 or 60%. Some people say no debt whatsoever. You already obviously said no, debt is fine, but is there a certain kind of metric that you stick to? What's it based on?
Yeah, my metric, I mean, this is me. So I have some people that I partner with that are real debt averse, and they happen to have a lot of cash on hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically we partner on deals and we pay cash for the house and don't put any debt on it, which obviously gives us a lot more cash flow immediately. But those people are rare.
Less ROI, right? Less
right.
return on investment, but obviously higher pure cash flow.
Correct. And so you need fewer houses if they're paid for to generate the cash flow you need. Yep. I didn't have the luxury of having a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines, nor did my family. So I had to start with I started with 100% leverage, which I don't recommend. But at the time, looking back, I was buying my first house for $70,000 and we fixed it up for 15. That's 85. Today, yep. that's a laughable number 15 years later. But at the time, it was like, man, I'm going to borrow 100%. And if this doesn't work, man, I'm going to have to pay this off myself. But the reality is if you don't pay too much for the real estate, you should be able to get out and pay the loan off. You might not make any money, but you shouldn't lose any unless you overpaid or you really messed up the renovation somehow. Yeah. So you've mitigated your downside if you just do one thing correctly. Do not overpay for the real estate.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, one of my rules when I was buying a lot of single family houses and duplexes was Each property can't be leveraged over. It has to be debt service coverage ratio is what I focused on. I didn't focus
Right.
necessarily on LTV because,
Right.
values, like you said, you're buying it for 70 grand or you're all in at 70 grand. Well, that number is laughable. What I was more concerned about was the debt service coverage. And I was at 175. It had to be 175 or greater debt service coverage ratio. Now, buying multifamily, we definitely get a little bit more aggressive. We're into the 140, 150 debt service coverage ratio. But I think as long as you're keeping good, strong, solid cash flow and you're just being prudent about what those numbers really are and look like and have some good reserves, you'll probably do just fine. And you don't need to worry. I shouldn't say worry, but you don't, if you're following the right metrics, your leverage isn't going to be out of whack.
Yeah, and leverage is always a very subjective thing because you're basically getting an appraisal from a third party.
Right.
And you and I both know some of these appraisals come back and you're like shaking your head.
Yeah.
Either this is not even close to the ballpark of being accurate, and it could be both on the low or the high
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really doesn't matter, especially when you're looking at a single family home. It really doesn't matter what the thing is worth. It matters how much you cash flow, right? It matters that you're making money. That's all that matters. And that's why I focused on debt service coverage ratio and still do so much, is it really matters how I can pay my debt and how much margin I have there.
Yeah, and banks love it when you get more conservative, and the more conservative you are, the more they love you. So
Yeah, that's for
if you're not,
sure.
yeah, like I said, I don't think looking back and borrowing 100,000 unsecured, making $80,000 a year was probably the smartest thing to do at the time from a conservative financial position, but it was the smartest thing I could have done by jumping in and getting things done. And really looking back at the risk I had taken, it was virtually zero.
Yeah, and that's another thing that listeners you got to think about too is what's your risk? What's your risk tolerance? Where are you in life? And obviously, as long as you're doing things morally, ethically, legally, be taking a little bit more risk at times is definitely worth it if it's going to allow you to get the ball moving. And getting the ball moving is the most important thing. Like you didn't know, you said earlier, you didn't know what you would be good at and bad at. You knew obviously some things, but you didn't know what you would like and dislike. And you figured it out by actually taking action, getting a deal done. And that's how you figure it out. And you over leveraged it, or put a lot of leverage on, I should say. But again, the most important factor right there was that you got started and that the numbers still worked, even though you put 100% leverage on it. The numbers still worked, and still the deal made sense. So, Dave, what's a mistake that you've made, and how can you pass down what you learned to our listeners?
So oddly enough, one of the bigger mistakes people make is they don't pay enough attention to the insurance component of the contract of the
Love
obviously
that.
if a banker's always, hey, get your insurance in place, make sure the coverage is there, and list us as the mortgagee clause. But from the standpoint of when you got a partnership and you got multiple partnerships, sometimes you can kind of toss things to your agent that you've trusted to do things correctly.
Yep.
And then you find out on the back end when you have a claim that, oh, this wasn't set up properly. And
Yeah.
in one instance, we had closed at a house and we bought it, fixed it up. It was a fourplex. Everything was rented. We put the permanent loan on it. 30 days later, I'm watching the television and I see one of those news stories about a fire engine putting out a fire. And I'm like, that looks familiar.
Mm,
So it caught fire. So I'm like, well, no big deal. We got coverage.
yeah.
Well, my partner and I called each other and essentially found out that the insurance agent titled on the policy a name of another partnership that we were involved in, but it wasn't that partnership. So there were two
Oh,
common partners in there, but there was a third that had nothing to do with it. So the insurance company was basically going to try to deny the claim.
wow.
And so we had to go back and go through all these hoops. And, these are little things, but they become bigger things. And at the end of the story is not only this is what I tell people in the book, this is like one of those worst case scenarios or like, well, this keeps people from doing real estate. But at the end of the day, we were able to sell that building, get the insurance proceeds that we got from the company finally, and we also made a profit even
Yeah.
after all that. So
Yeah.
to me, it's like as ugly as things could possibly get. If you do things correctly, your loss should be zero or minimal. In
Yep.
most cases, you probably will make some money if you've held on to it for very long.
I mean, we've had a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, we've had our handful of insurance incidences. And we make sure we get good insurance coverage from the beginning. We don't skimp on our insurance, or we try not to. We try to save money. Certainly, we don't try to pay the most amount, but we want to make sure that we're covered for the potential hazards that are around. And every single time, it's worked out into our favor. So yeah, having insurance, man, I actually helped manage a gal's property. She was based in California. She bought this house cash, and we had a tornado that ripped through the area. And luckily, it didn't do an amazing amount of damage to her property, but it certainly did some damage. Her roof and some other minor things needed to be done. And she, lo and behold, she had no insurance. She probably had about $30,000 worth of damage, and
Wow.
it didn't put insurance on the house because she bought it for cash. And she's like, well, I didn't think in Minnesota there would be anything that I would need insurance for.
There's
And
snow in Minnesota too, I hear.
yeah, it was snow and cold
Ice,
and
yeah.
ice and yeah, tornadoes, hail,
Fires.
fires. Yeah. I mean, so there's just a lot of things that can happen. I mean, I had a person that fell asleep and drove through one of my buildings. You just don't know what's going to happen. Freak things happen. And so, yeah, having good coverage is so important. All right, Dave, we got to wrap up. This has been fun, and I think people really need to get your book. And look, and maybe you got retirement all figured out, but I guarantee there's somebody in your life that doesn't. So, Middle Class to Millionaire, it's probably a great book to buy, and that we just passed Christmas, but it's never too late to give a belated Christmas or a birthday gift to somebody. So I think it'd be great to either buy it for yourself and read it, or buy it for a gift and give it away. But Dave, what beyond your book, what's a favorite book that's affected your life, and how can you pass it to our listeners?
So oddly enough, in my little short stint, and I don't know if this book's even available, I haven't looked, but there was a book that I read. I always like to read stories about founders of companies,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and because it really teaches you that, everybody looks at these guys that are billionaires now and say, oh, they have it made, but they had their struggles, they had their hard times.
yeah.
And so there was one book that was written when I was in my multi-level marketing phase, which was a total disaster. I didn't lose anything, but I didn't gain anything except some knowledge. But it was written by the guy that you probably remember that invented the term buy term insurance and invest the difference. If you heard that, he was a football coach and started a company called Primerica, which ended up being bought by Citibank, and he became a billionaire. And basically, the name of the book is "All You Can Do Is All You Can Do, but All You Can Do Is Enough." And I don't know if it's in print anymore, but if you can find that like in a used bookstore or on Amazon, it's a really good read, even though it's primarily about his story on starting this company of term insurance. He has his passion, why he did it. He was a football coach. It was a side gig for him. And he basically took this thing and turned it into a huge financial services company just because he had the passion, because his father had died with not enough life insurance. And he used that as a motivating factor to basically change the whole industry, because term insurance was something that was never sold much.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool. Well, hopefully listeners can find that book. Yeah, I do love CEO, and the just listening to some of these books that people wrote about starting their companies. Have you ever read or listened to the book Shoe Dog?
Oh yeah,
Phil
with
Knight.
Phil Knight.
That's a great book. Just his struggles. It's amazing. Most people see Phil Knight and think, well, rich guy, which he is now.
Yep.
But I mean, he had decades of struggle and barely making it by. So it's just amazing sometimes listening and hearing those books.
The funniest line in that book I remember right now from that book is he had on his board of directors, whatever, a lot of people that were pretty rough like him, that, hard scrabble. And he said, Nike is the only, when he was still there running it, he said, Nike is the only company where if one of the people on the board yelled out, "Hey, butthead," the entire board would turn around and look at him and
That's
say,
funny.
"Hey, you talking to me?"
Yeah, right. Who are you talking to? That's good. I love it. All right, Dave, last question. What are your 3 pillars of wealth creation?
Okay, well, the first one's obvious: real estate. It's the tool, the vehicle to get me where I couldn't get without, doing the other things that I tried. None of them worked. So real estate is the first one. It's the vehicle. But like I said, I don't have the passion for it. So the next pillar is something called who, not how. And the fact that I could not do the work myself, but I figured out who I could partner with. And that allowed me to scale. And the third one is the power of leverage. Because of my job as a banker, you were getting paid on, I'll just use going back to the same example. Bought the first house for 70, put 15 into it, appraised for 115. We just had that house appraised this last year, $325,000, and the house is paid off.
Wow.
And I never put a dime of my own money into that one. It was all borrowed money. So essentially it's like, that is why real estate is such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And if you don't ever buy something, you don't ever experience it. But literally every single person that's had lived in more than one house can look back years and see the original house they purchased, see what they bought it for, and see what it's worth today on Zillow or something, and say, man, I should have kept that house. And everybody says that, but nobody does it.
Yep. That's a perfect example of the power of leverage is that property right there. That's amazing. This has been a lot of fun. I really loved hearing the story, and man, congratulations, by the way, going from, just 4Xing, and I'm sure you're not stopping, right? It's going to be 5, 10, 6, 10, maybe even 10X. Your 401k that you've been putting in for 38 years versus real estate for 15. And now you're 4X that 401k. So that's amazing. That's awesome. It's been a fun story. Dave, how can our listeners get in touch with you or learn more about what you got going on? How can they get your book?
The book's on Amazon, so that's easy. Getting in touch with me is easy too, because I'm probably the only David Vernich in America. A good Croatian last name. There's lots of Verniches, but David Vernich in Nashville. So hook up with me on LinkedIn. And as a special gift to your listeners, Todd, I'd be willing to, if anybody hooks up with me on LinkedIn and just tries to connect with me, I'll send them a free copy. It'd be a PDF, but it'd be a free copy of the book.
Oh, that's cool. I really appreciate you doing that. Again, really thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you and appreciate the time you're able to spend with us.
Okay, Todd, thank you. I appreciate your time as well.
Take care.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day, I'll catch you on the next episode.